Let go of the day now. Close your eyes as the hush of evening wraps itself around your shoulders. We begin in the old city of Huck, where the perfume river curls like a satin ribbon around moss-covered pagodas and sleeping courtyards. The air here carries a sound too soft to call music, more like memory humming through bamboo, echoing against red lacquered gates that haven't opened in 100 years. And beneath the carved jade steps of the Forbidden's purple city, there is a song, one that only blooms at night. Lan was the only one who still remembered how to listen for it. She wasn't a priestess or a servant or even a proper gardener. She was simply there each morning before the sun warmed the tiles, sweeping petals from walkways long forgotten, tending to the lotus ponds with a wooden rake so worn it had grooves from her fingertips. But each dusk, as the imperial shadows stretched like sleeping cranes across the water, she would kneel beneath the jade steps, 6 of them, chipped and faded, and press her ear to the stone. Not every night whispered, but when it did, she could hear it, a song not sung by any throat, but exhaled by the earth itself. It rose in ripples beneath the stairs, passing through the lichen like breath through silk. The first time she heard it, she had been barely 10, now she was 17. And though no one else cared for the Forbidden City anymore, she never left it, because the song stayed. And so did she. Tonight, the lanterns in the old city had already blinked to life. A few muffled gongs echoed from far temples, signaling the first stars. In the distance, vendors called softly, their rice cakes wrapped in banana leaves, their voices drifting like smoke. But Lan was not among them. She was beneath the steps, barefoot on cool tiles, her simple cotton tunic damp with pond mist, her long black braid curled in her lap. She pressed her cheek to the bottom step. The stone smelled of rain and dust and something faintly sweet like dried jasmine hidden in the folds of an old letter. Then it began. Not all at once, but with a single tone, low, clear. Almost like a mother humming a note before she remembers the words. Lan's eyes fluttered shut. The tone rose, joined by another and another, not instruments, not voices, but textures. A drop of water hitting stillness, the soft crunch of a sandal on gravel, a breath held for just a moment too long. She didn't know who had carved this music into the stone. No scrolls explained it. No scholars mentioned it. How concubines once left offerings of plum blossoms in the water garden, their laughter hidden behind folded fans. But she knew it had been placed here, deliberately, like a secret waiting for someone quiet enough to hear. As the song swelled gently beneath her skin, she thought of the old stories, how emperors once walked these very steps in robes that swept like rivers. But all that was gone now. Only the stones remained, and her. When the final note fell, like a soft leaf touching the surface of a still pond, Lan opened her eyes. She sat up slowly. The air was thick with stillness. And there, just beside her sandal, lay a lotus petal. But this one was not pale pink. It was deep violet, and etched with something, not a word, not quite, but a symbol. One she had never seen before. She reached for it, hands trembling just slightly, because she realized the stone had not just sung to her tonight. It had answered. Lan held the violet lotus petal gently between her fingers. It was warm. Not like something sun-touched or fresh from a pond, but warm the way silk becomes after a long wear, carrying the shape and quiet breath of someone's hand. The symbol etched onto its surface was faintly glowing, not bright. Just enough for her to see that it wasn't written in ink or paint, but woven into the fibers. Or a spiral cloud. It resembled a curling vine. She traced it with the tip of her finger. The symbol shimmered once and faded, and as it disappeared, something changed. The silence thickened, not ominously, but intimately, as if the garden itself had leaned in, waiting. Lan glanced toward the jade steps. They were quiet again, ordinary under the moonlight. The song had finished, but the petal had not been a mistake. She rose slowly, tucking it into the inside fold of her tunic. The path back to her small hut wound along the edges of the palace grounds, past crumbled arches, past silent gates, through sleeping trees that knew no rush. She walked barefoot. She always did after hearing the song. It helped her feel the old rhythms of the place. The way the earth curved softly beneath each step, the way moss greeted her like a sigh. As she passed the moon pond, she paused. Her reflection stirred back wide eyes, soft jaw, hair dark as ink. But tonight, in the surface ripple beside her, another face lingered, just for a second. A woman's, older, not aged. Her hair was coiled high in the ancient court style, held with silver pins shaped like cranes. Her gaze met Lan's, unheld. Then the ripple broke, and she was gone. Lan didn't move for a long time. When she finally reached her hut, the lantern outside was still glowing barely, its oil nearly gone. She stepped inside. The space was humble, woven mat, simple bedding, a bowl of rice left untouched. But in the corner, her wall of petals. She had never told anyone. Each time the stones sang, and she heard something new, she found a petal slightly different in shade, shape, or weight. She would write on them what she remembered, a sound, a feeling, sometimes even a single word that surfaced in her mind while listening. Tonight's petal was the first to come before her writing. It had written to her. She placed it gently above the others, and for the first time, the petals around it began to stir, softly, a breeze, though no window was open. The petals rustled in patterns, as though a rhythm beneath the rhythm had been awakened. She sat down slowly, heart quiet but alert. Something had shifted. The song beneath the jade steps was changing. And now, it was not only being heard. It was calling. Lan did not sleep that night, not from fear or worry, but from the hush that settled over her bones, an alertness not born of wakefulness, but of invitation. She sat by the low window, knees tucked under her, eyes tracing the shape of the violet petal now nestled among the others. They no longer sat still like a shrine. They moved now, slowly, rhythmically. It was as if the petals had become a kind of breath, and Lamb knew breath meant song, and song meant memory, and memory was calling. She waited until the first pale blue slipped into the sky. Not dawn, not yet, just the soft breath before. Then she dressed quietly and stepped into the garden. The forbidden city still slumbered. Its shadows stretched long and still, the cracked roofs hiding stories in their curled edges. Even the koi in the pond slept under lily pads, like forgotten coins at the bottom of a wishing jar. But Lamb didn't head for the jade steps. She followed a different path. Past the perfumed gate, past the temple that only opened on the emperor's birthday, though no emperor had walked its halls in generations. To the east wall. There, hidden behind a curtain of vines and old plaster, stood a door carved with blossoms. She had only ever looked at it, never opened it. It was not locked, just old, forgotten. But today, her fingers moved to the worn handle, and the moment her skin touched it, she felt warmth, a breath. She pulled. The door opened with a soft sigh, and inside the air was cooler, deeper and sweet. A room lay beyond, small and circular, with walls of rice paper painted in faded scenes, mountains, cranes, children chasing butterflies. In the center stood a stone basin filled with still water, and in it a voice, not a sound, a presence. Lan stepped closer, and just as her reflection touched the water, the voice rose, not with words, but with humming. A lullaby with no language, made of breath and pause and space, and Lan knew it. She had never heard it before, but she knew it. She dropped to her knees and, without realizing, began to hum along. The two voices, hers and the one from the water, wove together gently, not harmony, but remembrance. And as she sang, the room grew brighter, not with sun, but with time. The painted walls shimmered colors returning, figures moving, The children danced. The cranes spread wings. The blossoms bloomed. And then, when the lullaby reached its quiet end, Lan looked into the water once more and saw her reflection, but not only hers, a second face, the woman from the pond, the one with crane pins in her hair. She was smiling now, and her eyes whispered something Lan could not hear but felt, a name. Lan whispered it aloud, "My lie," and the air changed. The water pulsed once, and the basin glowed faintly. Lan did not know who My lie was, but her heart did. And the stones beneath the jade steps, she was certain, would know too. Lan stood still in the quiet circular room, the air around her full of soft echoes and the warmth of something long hidden. The name My lie still lingered on her lips, as if spoken not in sound but in breath. She didn't know where it had come from, only that it had risen like a bird from her chest when she saw the woman's reflection in the water. And now the room no longer felt still, as if the memory inside was not yet ready to be touched again. It felt expectant. She reached out to touch the surface of the water again, but this time it rippled before her fingers came close, so she waited, not impatiently. There were tiny figures tucked among the brushstrokes, musicians with flutes, women in flowing OT-than gowns, and in one corner, a small child holding a lantern shaped like a lotus. She knew now that time moved differently here. Her eyes scanned the painted walls once more, where the inked butterflies flitted near the blossoms, and the mountain seemed to breathe in the soft light. Lan stepped closer. No, not Lan. Lan. That was how she had begun to think of herself now, as if her name had become one strand in a longer weave of time. Connected to this place, this hush, this unfolding story, she touched the image of the child in the painting, and the lantern glowed, just faintly, enough to cast a halo on her fingertips. Her heart quickened, not in fear, but in the quiet thrill that follows a dream half remembered. She turned back to the basin. The water had stilled once more, and at its bottom, resting like a pearl, lay something new. A comb, ivory delicately curved, etched with clouds and cranes like the ones in the woman's hair. Lan reached in. The water was warm, and as her fingers closed around the comb, the lullaby returned, not from the basin this time, but from her own lips. She was humming it before she knew what she was doing. The notes fell easily, as if they had always lived just beneath her skin. She held the comb to her chest, and then the door behind her creaked. She turned. A breeze had entered, though there were no windows. It carried the scent of jasmine and old parchment. Outside, the vines stirred like waking thoughts. Lan stepped through the doorway, holding the comb in one hand, the name My lie in the other tucked like a folded letter behind her ribs. The palace grounds looked unchanged, but something in their silence had deepened. She walked back toward the jade steps, the early light softening the old stone paths. When she arrived, she sat not as she always had, but with the comb resting beside her. And when she pressed her cheek to the first step, the song returned. But this time it came with words, old words, woven with mist and lotus dust. They rose in her mind like steam from tea. The jade remembers who listens. The song is not sung, it is carried. And then another petal drifted down, this one pale gold. No wind stirred, it simply arrived and nestled beside her. She picked it up gently, no symbol this time, just one word. Return. Lan turned the golden petal over in her fingers, expecting it to fade as the violet one had. But it stayed. It felt almost like paper, now thicker than a true petal, soft but firm, as though meant to be held. Return, it read. The word shimmered faintly, like breath on a mirror. The garden had begun to warm in the morning sun, the air rippling with a quiet shimmer. Mist still clung to the lotus pond, but now it curled in patterns that felt almost like writing loops and curves dancing above the water. and she could not tell if it was a command, a memory, or a promise. She reached the far end, where a small bridge of aged teak arched low over a narrow channel. This bridge, once painted red, now faded to a warm gray, had been her favorite hiding place as a child. She tucked it gently into her tunic beside the comb and rose from the jade steps. She followed them, not with her eyes alone, but with something softer, deeper, her breath, perhaps, or the listening part of her that had always heard the songs before others could. The lotus pond was familiar, but now each leaf seemed to turn slightly as she passed, as though acknowledging her, not to anyone living, but to the past. She paused there, kneeling at its edge. Something tugged at her chest, a sense of incompletion. There was something she had forgotten. And suddenly she remembered. A letter. Years ago, when she was still new to the city's silences and the stones still intimidated her more than they comforted her, she had begun to write letters. She had written one, her first and only, and tucked it under the third stone step, where the moss grew thickest. It had never been opened, but now her fingers moved toward that space. She brushed the moss aside, slow and careful, and there, aged and curled at the edges, was the letter, still folded, still sealed with a pressed flower that had long since browned to dust. She opened it. The paper crackled softly, and the words stared back at her in her own looping handwriting. She had written, "If you ever hear me, even once, I will never leave you." Bamboo arched overhead like ribs of a sleeping dragon, their leaves filtering the light into soft green hush. She had forgotten writing it, but her hand remembered. And now she had been heard. She folded the letter again, not to hide it, but to honor it. She didn't return it to the stone. She carried it with her this time. Wayne crossed the bridge and followed the narrow path beyond it, deeper into a part of the palace garden she hadn't walked in years. At the end of the path stood an archway, a smaller one made of stone and woven with roots. It was not on any of the maps the old caretakers used, but she remembered it. It was where her mother used to hum lullabies while she pressed herbs into bundles, before she vanished. Before the silence deepened, the arch looked different now. It pulsed faintly, like the step had when she pressed her ear to it. Lan walked through it, and on the other side, she was not alone. On the other side of the root-wrapped arch, Lan paused. The air had changed. It no longer smelled of moss or morning dew, but of wax, ash, and faint sandalwood curling through the leaves. Her eyes adjusted slowly. The hidden grove beyond the arch opened like a secret breath. Bamboo gave way to weeping willows, their silvered strands swaying in a breeze she couldn't feel, and hanging from their branches hundreds of lanterns, maybe thousands. Some flickered softly, some glowed steady. All cast warm halos of amber and pearl light across the grass. Each one was different, shaped like fish, fans, peaches, birds. One swayed softly in the form of a lotus bell, ringing in complete silence. Lan stepped forward, slow and barefoot. The lanterns swung gently at her passing, not from the wind, but as if they recognized her. Some hung low enough to brush her shoulder, others floated high like stilled stars. But all of them hummed, not in music, not in words, in tones, textures like breath against silk, like the memory of laughter in an empty hallway, the same resonance as the jade steps and the water basin, and the voice that had spoken her name through silence. Deeper into the grove she walked, and as she passed, the lanterns grew brighter, responding to her presence. She felt the hum grow warm in her chest, like a note she hadn't yet sung. Then came a voice, soft as a moth's wing brushing paper. "You brought it." She turned quickly. No figure stood behind her, but the voice was near. Not from the trees or above, but all around her. Like a memory breathed into the air itself. "The comb," the voice whispered. "She's been waiting." Lan reached into the folds of her tunic, fingers closing around the ivory comb. She drew it out. At once, a crane-shaped lantern above her flared softly with light and descended, gliding through the willow strands like a dream. It hovered before her, pulsing once, then opened like a blossom, inside a cradle of light. Their hum became richer, still gentle, but no longer distant. It filled her, wrapped around her. Not loud, not urgent. Curved perfectly, waiting, Lamb placed the cone gently inside. The moment she let go, the entire grove changed. The lanterns deepened in color, shifting from pale silver to golden firelight, just present. A warm wave of memory and welcome of something ancient, waking not with force, but with recognition. The crane lantern glowed brighter and cast out a single thread of gold light. It stretched to the nearest lantern, and then that lantern passed it to the next, and the next, until every lantern in the grove shimmered and sang in rhythm. Lan stood in the center of it all, her eyes wide, heart quiet, as the threads of light crisscrossed above her like constellations. Then a path revealed itself. It hadn't been there before. A walkway of grass and soft lantern light, curving deeper into the grove. And at the end of that path stood a woman, hair pinned high with silver cranes. Her robe whispered with every breath of the grove. She stood still, waiting. Lan stepped toward her, the lantern swaying gently in time with her heartbeat. She didn't feel afraid. She felt returned. Lan's feet barely made a sound on the path lined with lanterns. The grass beneath her was cool and forgiving, like it had been waiting for her steps all along. The woman at the end of the grove stood completely still, not frozen, not ghostly, still like water that knew exactly how to wait. As Lan approached, the willows bowed low, their silver-green strands brushing her shoulders and hair. Her hair was gathered high in the imperial style, and the comb Lan had placed in the lantern grove was its twin one now resting in the folds of her hair, the other held in silence nearby. The lanterns above dimmed slightly, not in fear, but as if yielding their light to the figure who stood ahead. She wore robes the color of moonstone and lavender, her sleeves embroidered with flying cranes, so fine they looked like they might lift away at any breath of wind. The woman didn't speak, not at first. Lan stopped just a few steps away, her hands folded before her chest. She didn't bow, not because she lacked respect, but because something deeper told her this was not a moment of ritual, but recognition. Finally, the woman smiled. It was not wide. It was not sad. It was the kind of smile that belonged in lullabies. "You've been listening," she said softly. Lan nodded. "Then you've already begun remembering?" A breeze stirred. The lanterns tilted gently in their places, and some of the willows began to hum again, not as individuals, but as a single voice. Lan opened her mouth to ask who she was, but the woman held up one hand. "Let the memory come in its own time. Questions are not needed here." She turned slowly, her sleeves trailing behind like ribbons, and began to walk deeper into the trees. Without hesitation, Lan followed. The path now was narrower, the lanterns more spaced, and the light had shifted less golden now, more like candlelight underwater. "This place," the woman said softly, "was once a place of waiting." Lan listened. A garden kept not for beauty, but for safekeeping. For voices that had no place in the halls above. For songs too soft for thrones to hear. They passed a stone bench, cracked in two, a basin filled with smooth white stones. A rusted gate that hung open but led only to vines. "I was once like you," the woman said, glancing back. Lan's breath caught, but I forgot. I stopped listening, and the garden grew quiet. They stopped at the edge of a small pool, its surface so still it seemed made of silk. The woman extended her hand, fingers tracing a small circle above the water. Ripples formed, and in them Lan saw her own face, but younger, running through this very grove, a ribbon trailing from her hair, her laughter echoing faintly. Then another image, a woman beside her, a lullaby in her voice, a comb in her hair, the same smile, the same softness in her gaze. My lie, Lan whispered. The woman nodded. You were never left behind, only gently forgotten. But even forgotten things can remember how to bloom. She turned to face Lan fully now. Would you like to remember the rest? Lan's throat tightened, but she nodded. Because she was ready. My lie's fingers hovered just above the surface of the silk-smooth pool. No ripple stirred now. The image had faded. But something warm lingered like the echo of a bell long after the sound had gone. Lan stood at the edge, her heart slow and full, like a vessel not yet spilled, of lullabies, of the names we once called one another. This, my lie said gently, is where the garden keeps the oldest things, not just of stone or scent, but of love. Lan knelt beside the water. She didn't need to ask what came next. She placed both her hands palm down on the mossy stone edge and closed her eyes. The breeze cooled. The lanterns above dimmed to a breath, and then the water touched her fingers. She hadn't moved, but it rose. Soft as sleep, a trickle first, then a gentle press like a hand reaching back, and suddenly Lan was elsewhere, not physically, but fully. Inside the memory. She was small again, 5 or maybe 6, running barefoot beneath rain-heavy clouds, laughing as she weaved between the white plum trees behind the palace. The garden hadn't been overgrown then. It had been full of women in bright robes, soft songs rising with the scent of jasmine and mint. One more time, and I'll sing the verse. Her mother might lie stood beneath a parasol, watching with a calm smile and eyes that always looked like they were remembering something kind. Again, Lan, she called. Lan squealed with delight and darted through the trunks, her feet light on the damp earth. She returned, breathless. My lie knelt and scooped her up into her arms, warm and smelling faintly of cedar and rice powder. And then came the song, soft, low, hummed against the shell of her ear. No words, just the melody gentle as rain tapping stone. Lan, small and sleepy, had whispered something. Will the song always find me? And my lie had answered, yes, my little bell. Even when we forget, it remembers. Lan opened her eyes. She was back beside the pool. My lie sat beside her now, hands folded in her lap. Neither spoke for a long time. The memory had not faded. It had simply returned where it belonged. You were taken from me, Lan said quietly, not accusing, not afraid. No, my lie said. I stepped away to let you return. Lan looked into her mother's eyes and saw all the years they had lost, and none of the love. The silence between them now was not empty. It was filled with recognition and forgiveness. My lie stood and offered her hand. Lan took it. They walked together now, not down a lantern path, but deeper into the heart of the garden, where roots tangled gently across the earth, and the air smelled of old paper and warm tea. Ahead of them stood a tree, twisted, wide, its bark gray with time, but its leaves still the soft green of lullabies. The memory tree, my lie said. Each lantern is born from here, each petal, each step, each hum in the stone. Lan reached out and touched the bark. It was warm. The tree shuddered gently under her palm, and a single leaf drifted down, settling into her open hand. On its surface, a word, remember. Lan turned the leaf in her palm. Remember, not an instruction, not even a request, a simple truth. The tree rustled gently overhead, not stirred by wind, but by something deeper presence, perhaps, or joy. My lie stood beside her, hands folded, head bowed slightly toward the tree. The silence between them was now rich with all that didn't need to be said. Lan looked back over the path they had walked. The lantern grove shimmered softly behind the willows, still humming, but quieter now, like a music box that had played its tune and was gently winding down. The jade steps waited somewhere beyond, worn smooth by time and the quiet weight of returning footsteps. Lan breathed in slowly. The scent of the garden was different now, still earthy, still ancient. But there was something new threaded into it. Hope, not loud, not bright, but rooted. My Lai reached for Lan's hand. Their fingers curled together, and in that small gesture, years folded like silk neatly, gently, without grief. Will you stay? Lan asked. My Lai looked at her, eyes full of hush. I never truly left, Lan nodded. She understood now. This garden wasn't just memory, it was connection. Between what was spoken and what was sung. Between mother and daughter. Between past and now. What happens next? Lan asked softly. My Lai smiled. You'll walk the garden again, sometimes alone, sometimes with song, sometimes in silence, but always listening. And with that, My Lai turned. Not vanishing, not fading, just becoming part of the grove again. A warmth among the lanterns, a hush beneath the tree, a hum in the jade. Lan stood alone beneath the memory tree, but she didn't feel alone. She pressed the leaf with the word remember into the pocket of her tunic, beside the golden petal and the old letter. Then she stepped back toward the arch, the path, the steps, the world beyond. The garden did not close behind her. It waited. It always would, because the song beneath the jade steps was never lost. Only listening. And Lan, she would always know how to sing it, even in silence.